One of the hardest parts about shipping code is working on a large feature, while other developers are working on the same portions of the code. There are two ways that we can do this. The first is that we can create a branch in our revision control software and develop the whole feature in that branch over several weeks or months. Every day we'll want to merge in the changes that others are making so that we have our code up to date. The annoying part of this process is that we're going to get stuck merging in other developers' changes. This is because they're unaware of how our changes are affecting the same code. These long-lived branches also tend to be hard to merge back into the main branch and are a headache for all involved. The second method is to develop small changes that take no longer than a day or so to create and are constantly being merged back into the main branch. It makes our job much easier. The downside to this is that we then have to hide the new feature from our users until it's ready to be deployed. In this video, we'll explain how to do that using feature toggles. Hello developers and welcome to PHP Developers TV, your home for everything you need to know to be a knowledgeable PHP developer. I'm your host, as always, Scott Keck Warren. In this video, we're going to be discussing what are feature toggles. Feature toggles are a powerful technique that allows our team to modify system behavior without directly changing the code. This is done by setting configuration settings that hide features or that allow the swapping of one set of logic for another dynamically. This allows us to develop new features in production code and only allow some users to access some features. A downside to feature toggles is that they increase the complexity of our code. Bugs thrive in complexity, so it's important that we do our best to implement them as cleanly as possible. If possible, we want to constrain the total number of toggles inside of our software. Feature toggles can be referred to by multiple names: feature toggle, feature flipper, conditional feature, feature switch, feature control, and release toggle. We're going to try and stick to feature toggle in this when to use feature toggles. Deciding how the feature toggle will be enabled is generally the first step to creating one. It can be decided by our product team if the feature needs to be enabled on a per client or per user basis, by our ops team if we need to be able to disable something for maintenance, or by our development team if we need to roll out the changes or provide continuous integration. It could be a combination of all of them, or we might decide we don't need one at all. There are various needs that feature toggles can fulfill. Our example before was a case where we needed to make a large change to our system that we believe will take several days or weeks, so maintaining the change becomes a maintenance task of its own. The solution to this is to merge in the changes often, but then hide that feature from the users. Once the feature is fully developed and tested, we can then turn it on. We could also use feature toggles to create a canary launch of a feature. This is where we slowly roll out a new feature to all of our users. This is helpful if we're weary of how the feature will be used in practice and want to get some more test information back about how our users are interacting with it. More and more software, especially software as a service, is deploying new features using this method. We can also use feature toggles as a way to provide different levels of access to the system. For example, we might provide 3 tiers of subscription that give our users access to different features depending on their subscription level. Another prime example is giving our operations team the ability to selectively shut down portions of our software when they need to perform maintenance. For example, we might be rebuilding or altering a large table. Instead of letting our users run into an error when they attempt to use the feature, we can just disable it. Then we can provide a helpful explanation of what's going on and not just a generic error page. It's important to remember that feature toggles add a development overhead to our project. Instead of just creating a new feature and letting everyone have access to it, we have multiple paths our code can traverse that need to be tested. If the feature is eventually going to be rolled out to everyone, the project needs to have a cleanup process to remove the extra code, enabling a feature toggle. There are a couple of ways that we can determine who has access to a feature. Because we're already using a database to store our users, we can add a new column to the users table and make the determination using that column. Then we just need a process to turn this column to a 1 for a set of users every hour or day or week or month, depending on how much data we want before proceeding. It's nice to have a set of thresholds, so we like to ramp up the number of users with access to the feature. We can do this manually or automatically. Automatic is nice because no additional involvement is required and stopping the rollout can happen if there's a problem. Manual is nice because we can take a good look at our metrics to see how the feature is being used before the rollout continues. The other option is to roll out the feature algorithmically. In this code sample, the 1 indicates the percentage of users who should have access to this feature. In the least complex method for rolling this out, we can just manually increase that value. A better process is to create a function to determine what that number is based on the date, so the feature will continue to roll out to our users automatically. We could get complicated with the logic, but it's best to keep it simple. The downside of this function is that the same users will be the test subjects every time, and they might be annoyed at running into errors all the time. We like the database rollout process better. This is because we can randomize who gets the new feature, or even assign the new feature to individuals who haven't been in the earlier tiers the last couple times. New feature with a toggle. As an example, let's add a new feature to our system that allows users to view all of the events that they're interested in attending. We want to slowly roll this feature out to our users, so we're going to use a feature toggle to do that. Because it's a new feature and not a change in logic, when we're developing the feature, we'll want to make sure that we add logic to the controllers that prevents users who don't have access to the feature from accessing that endpoint. Then, whenever we create a link to the new controller, we'll hide them for users who don't have the feature turned on. This method of hiding user interface elements from our users is by far the simplest way to implement a feature toggle. The cleanup for this example is that after we've rolled out the feature and we know we're not going back, we need to remove the column from the users table and then delete the code that calls the Can See Interested Events page. It's mostly an easy process, but it does require some testing. Replacing logic with a toggle. As another example, let's say we're going to change how we charge our users. We currently charge different prices depending on the size of the event being hosted, but we need to raise our prices for all types of events. We're going to grandfather in our existing clients until the end of the year, so we need to be able to turn the new prices on for new users, but still allow the old prices. Our current pricing looks something like this. To handle the two potential branches of our pricing logic now, we have to have something like this. We're not a huge fan of this because eventually we're going to have to clean up all these if statements. A better solution is to create a class to handle which pricing model we're using. We're going to have it derive from a common interface so we can make sure the same functions exist in every type. Then we can create a class that implements our current pricing model. Notice how it reduces the number of if blocks as well. Then we can quickly add a class for our updated pricing model. As before, we'll define a function in our users class to determine which logic to use. The database's default value can be 1 so that all new users automatically have the new pricing, and we can set our existing users to 0. We'll also create a function that will load the appropriate class for the pricing. Finally, in our logic where we calculate the price, we can now use the getPricingModel function. It was a lot of work getting to this point, and it may seem like it's too much, but we spent more time up front to make sure that the pricing logic is simple and easy to clean up later. In order to clean this up, we just need to change the getPricingModel function so it only returns the new updated pricing model. Then we can delete our original pricing model class. We'll have to decide if we get rid of the getPricingModel function. It's going to depend on how likely we feel it is that we might change the pricing again in the future. What you need to know. Feature toggles allow modifications of system behavior with no code changes. Examples include new features, changes in logic, and disabling modules for maintenance. As always, thank you for watching our video. We couldn't do it without your support. Please make sure you subscribe, comment, and like as it helps others find us. Do you want to see your name included in the credits? Check out our recently launched Patreon. The link is in the comments. This is Scott Keck Warren for PHP Developers TV signing off and reminding you to keep coding.